I thought sleeping over at my best friend's house would be just another summer night. Movies, junk food, the usual. But when his dad looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through me, everything changed. I didn't expect the heat between us, or what we'd end up doing when no one else was around. The first time I saw the ocean that summer, it felt like the world paused, just long enough for me to take a breath. Jason had the windows down as we drove along the winding coastal road, his playlist blasting something upbeat while the salt air whipped through our hair. We were freshly graduated, buzzing with that kind of freedom that only exists right before your life changes. College was on the horizon, but for now it was just the two of us, and a long weekend at his dad's beach cabin. Mark's place sat nestled between two massive dunes, weathered, sun-bleached, with a wraparound porch and a hammock that swayed even when there was no wind. I'd been there once before, years ago, but this time everything felt different. Maybe because I was older. Maybe because I was noticing things I hadn't before. Or maybe because Jason's dad didn't look quite like I remembered. Mark greeted us from the porch, holding a cold drink and grinning like someone who'd mastered the art of living slowly. He wore loose board shorts and a faded gray tank top that clung to his chest in the humid breeze. His hair was longer than last time, sun-kissed and pushed back, and his face carried that easy confidence some men just seem to have without even trying. He looked younger than most guys in their 40s, tanned, fit, and untouched by time. "About time you two showed up," he said, stepping down to grab one of our bags. Jason rolled his eyes, laughing. "Blame traffic. And he needs a snack stop every hour." I grinned. "Hey, road trip rules. Gas, snacks, and bad music." Mark smirked, the corners of his eyes crinkling as he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Good to see you again."
You retaller.
His hand lingered just a second too long before he turned away. "Come on, let's get you settled." Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming. Driftwood tones, open windows, and the scent of salt and pine on the breeze. Jason led me to the guest room while Mark disappeared into the kitchen. I tried to shake the strange flicker in my chest, the one that sparked when Mark looked at me like he hadn't expected me to grow up. The first day passed like any perfect summer afternoon. Barefoot walks in the sand, iced drinks on the porch, and a lazy dinner of grilled burgers while the sky melted into pink and orange. Mark was easy to talk to, quick with a joke, and always watching in that quiet way people do when they're used to being alone. I caught him glancing at me once while I laughed at something Jason said, but I dismissed it. Maybe he was just surprised at how much we'd changed. That night, we stayed up watching movies. Jason fell asleep halfway through, sprawled out on the couch with popcorn on his chest. Mark and I sat in silence, the soft glow of the screen casting shadows across his face. Eventually, I said goodnight and made my way to bed. But even under the thin cotton sheets, I couldn't shake the way he'd looked at me in the dark. The next day, Jason got a call from his girlfriend, Mia. She was dealing with some family drama and begged him to come help. He looked torn, but I waved him off. "Dude, go. You've been complaining about missing her all week. I'll be fine." "You sure?" he asked, already grabbing his keys. "Positive. It's just one afternoon." He grinned. "All right, don't let my dad rope you into any weird yoga routines." I laughed. No promises. After he left, the cabin felt too quiet. I wandered out to the back deck, the ocean breeze warm on my skin. Mark was down by the shoreline, shirtless again, messing with the old kayak. He looked up when he saw me and waved me over. "Water's great today. You swim?" "Yeah," I said, already peeling off my shirt. Might be the only way to survive this heat. I dove into the surf, the cool rush washing away the sticky warmth clinging to my skin. I floated there for a while, letting the sun kiss my face, the waves rocking me gently. When I finally swam back, Mark was waiting near the foot of the deck, holding a towel. "Good timing," he said, tossing it to me. "Ever try the sauna? The one out back?" I asked, catching my breath. He nodded. "Nothing fancy, but after a swim, perfect way to unwind. Clear your head." "Sounds kind of nice," I admitted, squeezing water from my hair. "I'll fire it up," he said, already walking toward the small wooden shed tucked beside the dune grass. Come by at 10. When I stepped into the sauna, the heat wrapped around me like a second skin. The air was thick with cedar and steam, the only light filtering through narrow slats in the wood. I sank onto the bench, a towel around my waist, and closed my eyes. I told myself this was normal, just a sauna, but my heart was already racing. The door creaked. Mark stepped inside, a towel low on his hips. Hope you don't mind, he said. Figured you could use some company. I didn't answer right away. He sat across from me, relaxed, one leg stretched out, like he belonged there. The space felt smaller now. The heat, heavier. You tense? He asked after a minute, his voice low. Not really, I lied. Sauna's good for loosening up. You just have to let go. I nodded, my mouth dry. His gaze wasn't obvious, but I could feel it, like fingertips brushing over my skin. A drop of sweat slid down his chest, following the curve of his torso. I looked away. Then his hand brushed my knee. Barely a touch. Maybe unintentional. Maybe not. You okay? He asked, softer now. Yeah, I said quickly, shifting where I sat. The silence stretched, but he didn't push. Eventually he stood, steam swirling around him. I'll give you a bit of space, he said, hand resting on the doorframe. When he left, I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. I stayed a little longer, the air thick with thoughts I couldn't untangle. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The waves crashed in the distance, rhythmic and slow, but my mind wouldn't stop. I kept seeing him, Mark, in the sauna. The way he looked at me, like he knew what I was thinking before I did. I rolled over, pulling the sheets tight around me, trying to convince myself it didn't mean anything, that nothing happened. But I wasn't sure if I believed that. Not anymore, because now I know. That was the beginning. The sunlight was already pouring through the windows when I woke the next morning, painting the room in warm gold. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark, sitting there, across from me in the sauna. His skin damp with sweat, his eyes slow and searching. There was a weight to his presence I couldn't shake. I'd replayed the moment his hand brushed my knee at least a dozen times, trying to figure out if it meant anything, or if I was just imagining it all. Downstairs, the smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, grounding me enough to push the thoughts aside. Jason stood at the counter in a t-shirt and boxers, his hair a mess, spooning cereal into his mouth like nothing had changed overnight. Maybe for him, nothing had. Sleep okay? He asked between bites. I shrugged, pouring myself a mug. Yeah, fine. He glanced sideways. You're quieter than usual. Everything's cool, I said quickly, forcing a smile. Just still waking up, I guess. He didn't press. Jason never did. One of the things I liked most about him, he gave you space when you needed it. We spent the morning hanging around the cabin. Jason and I played cards on the porch while Mark worked on something in the shed. I tried to act normal, like nothing had shifted, but my eyes kept drifting. The way Mark moved, the way he glanced up and caught me watching him, always with that unreadable expression. Around noon, Jason got another call from Mia. I could tell from his voice it was going to be a while. Eventually, he stuck his head outside. She's freaking out again, he said. Something with college paperwork. I gotta go calm her down. Another rescue mission? I asked, half teasing. Yeah. Hero boyfriend duties. He slipped his keys into his pocket. You sure you're good here alone again? I'll survive. Dad's around. Try not to let him bore you to death. Mark raised an eyebrow from where he stood at the workbench. Charming as always. Mark appeared a few minutes later, stepping in from the deck already dressed in a faded blue tank and cargo shorts. He looked at me a second too long before turning away to pour himself a drink. I felt the skin on the back of my neck prickle. Morning, he said, his voice as calm as ever. Morning, I replied, eyes on my mug. Jason laughed, blew a kiss to the air, and disappeared down the road. Just like that, it was the two of us again. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure where to go or what to do. Mark set his wrench down and looked over his shoulder. Feel like giving me a hand? Unless you've got better plans. I hesitated. Sure. What are we fixing? He nodded toward the dock. One of the boards is warped. Needs replacing before someone falls through and breaks their back. I chuckled and stepped out onto the dock. The breeze off the water was warm but not stifling, the kind that carried the scent of salt and sun-bleached wood. Mark crouched near the edge, working at the board. I dropped beside him, accepting the screwdriver he handed me. For a while we worked in silence, the kind that felt comfortable until it didn't. I was too aware of how close our shoulders were, too aware of how his leg brushed mine, too aware of the way he smelled. Sweat, sunscreen, and something I couldn't name. At one point, I reached for a nail and shifted too quickly, almost slipping. His hand caught the small of my back, steadying me. His fingers spread slightly, warm, firm, and lingering. Too long. Careful, he murmured, voice low and close to my ear. This dock's not what it used to be. I nodded stiffly, pretending I didn't notice that his hand was still there. Eventually, I stood and wiped my palms on my shorts, forcing a casual tone. Think that's good for now. Mark looked up at me, squinting into the sun. Yeah, good work. His voice carried something else beneath the words. Back inside, I grabbed a bottle of water and tried to cool off, but it wasn't the heat that had my pulse racing. Mark passed me on his way into the kitchen, and again, I felt the space between us tighten. You all right? He asked casually, though his eyes said more. Yeah, just hot. He tilted his head slightly, then smiled. The sauna's probably ready. I blinked. You turned it on? Figured you'd want to relax again, he said. Helps, right? I hesitated. Every part of me told me not to go. And yet, I nodded. Sure. Why not? The sun was still high when I stepped into the sauna. Steam curled through the air like something alive. I sat on the bench, towel wrapped tight around my waist, trying to focus on the scent of cedar instead of my racing heart. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. Mark stepped in, just the towel.
No shirt. No tank.
Just him, his skin already glistening with the heat. He sat across from me again, arms resting behind his head, legs stretched out, too at ease to be accidental. We didn't speak at first. Then, in that same calm voice, he said, You've changed a lot since the last time you were here. I looked up, caught off guard. What do you mean? He shrugged. You've grown into yourself. It's not just the height. You're different. Heat rose up my neck, and not from the sauna. Guess we're all changing, I muttered.
He met my eyes.
Yeah, but not everyone notices it the same way. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, then closed. My pulse thundered. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're not a kid anymore. The words hit like a wave. I stood abruptly, grabbing my towel. I should go for a walk or something. I moved toward the door, fumbling with the latch, heart pounding. Then his hand touched my arm. Gentle, steady, not demanding. Just there. Hey, he said softly. You don't have to run. I stood frozen. His hand was warm against my skin, and I didn't pull away. I didn't know why. The silence between us stretched. Only the sound of our breath and the gentle hiss of steam. And I wasn't sure what scared me more, his touch, or how much I didn't want him to let go. There was more coming. By the third day, the weather had settled into something warm and slow, like the world was trying to lull me into surrender. Jason woke early, rummaging for his wallet, muttering about running into town for dinner supplies. I offered to come, craving any distraction, but he waved me off. It's a quick run, he said, tossing me the last slice of cold pizza. Relax. Dad probably has a project lined up for you anyway. I didn't argue. Maybe part of me knew it was time to face whatever this was between Mark and me. The silence, the touches, the words that lingered too long. When Jason's car disappeared down the gravel road, I stood barefoot on the deck, chewing cold pizza and staring at the water. The lake was calm, still, the kind of stillness that begged to be broken. I felt him before I saw him. Mark's presence always arrived like that, a shift in the atmosphere. He came up from the dock, wiping grease from his hands, eyes scanning me like he was reading. "You got a minute?" he asked. I nodded. My voice caught in my chest. "Yeah. Walk with me." We moved in silence down the dock, the sun warm on my shoulders, the wood creaking beneath our steps. Near the end, he stopped, leaning against a post, eyes on the water. "About yesterday," he began. I didn't answer. He glanced at me, then sighed. "I need to say this. You don't have to say anything back. But I felt something in that sauna. And I think you did too." My jaw tensed. It was just heat. A small space. "I don't know what you think happened," he said. "But you looked at me like you wanted me to touch you." His words cut deeper than I expected. "And when I did, you didn't stop me." "I was surprised," I said, though I didn't believe it. "You weren't scared," he said gently. "You were curious, maybe confused, but not scared." I looked away, my throat tight. "I haven't felt anything in a long time," he continued. "Not like that. Not real." He paused, voice lower now. "After the divorce, it's been quiet. Not lonely exactly, just still. Like nothing moved inside me for so long. I forgot what it felt like when something did." I turned slowly to face him. His eyes weren't predatory. They weren't even confident. They were raw, unhidden. "I'm not trying to mess with your head," he said. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't ignore what's between us. And I don't think you can either." I didn't answer. The silence wasn't empty. It pulsed with something we didn't have the words for. "Come inside," he said finally, soft but sure. We walked back up the dock. The cabin stood quiet, golden in the afternoon sun. Inside, Mark poured 2 drinks, bourbon, dark and sharp, and flicked on the old stereo. Soft music filled the room, all low piano and memory. He handed me the glass, our fingers brushing. We sat on opposite sides of the couch, cushions dipping beneath us. The bourbon burned its way down, warming me, but not calming me. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "If I'm wrong," he said, "tell me now." I didn't. He stood and crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of me. His hand reached out, not to grab, not to pull, just to touch. His fingers brushed my cheek. His thumb grazed the edge of my jaw. I held my breath, every nerve awake. "I can stop," he whispered. "Say the word." But I didn't. And when he leaned in, his lips met mine in a kiss that wasn't rushed or demanding. It was soft, steady, a question, and an answer. I didn't pull away. I let it happen. Let it warm me like sunlight through a window. His hand rested gently on my knee. Not moving, just there. The kiss ended, but we stayed close, foreheads nearly touching. My heart was thudding so loud, I was sure he could hear it. "I can stop," he said again, barely a breath. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to." But I didn't want him to stop. Not anymore. Couldn't lie anymore. Not to him and not to myself. So I shook my head, barely, and looked at him. And then I let him kiss me again. Only this time, I kissed him back. I don't remember how long we stayed like that, wrapped in silence, in warmth, in something neither of us dared to name. We didn't speak much after that second kiss. He just held me close, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheek, and I let myself rest my forehead against his chest. The music played on, quiet and slow, like the world outside had softened to match the rhythm between us. Eventually, I stood to leave, unsure of what this meant or what would come next. But before I reached the hallway, I heard him whisper, "This doesn't have to end here." And somehow, I already knew it wouldn't. Hours passed. The sky had shifted into deep lavender when Jason called. "Hey," he said, casual as ever. "Mia's having a night. Think I'll crash here and come back in the morning." I told him it was fine. More than fine, really. My voice stayed even, but my stomach twisted the second I hung up. Outside, the beach had gone still. Nothing but the whisper of waves. The cabin felt warmer now, dimly lit, quiet. Mark was still in the living room, lounging with a half-empty glass of bourbon. The music was low, something with piano and faint strings, soft and hazy like the heat that hadn't quite left the air. He looked up when I stepped in. "No, Jason." I shook my head. "Staying at Mia's." Mark nodded slowly. "Guess it's just us again." The words lingered, suspended in something that wasn't quite casual anymore. He reached over and turned the volume up just a notch. Not enough to drown anything out, just enough to blur the silence. He gestured to the armchair across from him. "Sit with me." I crossed the room slowly, heart thudding harder with every step. The lights were low, warm, and amber, casting shadows against the old wooden walls. I sat down, close enough to feel the weight of his gaze. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured. "I don't want to push you into anything." I nodded, eyes on the glass in my hands. "But," he added, leaning forward, "if you're still here right now, if you haven't walked away, then maybe you're feeling it too." He wasn't smiling. There was no teasing in his voice, just a raw kind of honesty that settled deep in my chest. I looked up slowly. "I don't know what this is." "Neither do I," he said. "But it doesn't feel like nothing, does it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He reached out, fingers brushing over mine, slow and careful. My breath caught, but I didn't pull away. I let him take my glass and set it aside. Then he stood, and so did I. Not because I decided to, but because my body already had. He moved first. One hand rested at the side of my neck, the other found my waist, drawing me in, not forcefully, but firm enough to let me know he meant it. His lips found mine slow, sure, and everything inside me unraveled. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't clumsy. It felt like we'd been circling this moment for days, maybe longer, and now that it was here, it didn't crash over us. It sank in slowly, deeply. I pressed into him, my hands on his chest, feeling the way his heart beat against mine. The kiss deepened. His hands moved to my back, steady, grounding, and I let myself get lost in him. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. He guided us to the couch without breaking the kiss. The music played on, soft and smooth, filling the spaces between our breaths. His hands moved along my sides, my arms, my face, each touch deliberate, respectful, undeniable. When his fingers slid beneath my shirt, I didn't stop him. I raised my arms. He pulled the fabric over my head slowly, like he was memorizing every inch. My skin prickled under his gaze, not with shame, but with something far more dangerous: tenderness. "You sure?" he asked, voice low, lips just inches from mine. I nodded, unable to find words. Clothes slipped away the way sunlight fades, bit by bit, layer by layer, until there was nothing between us but breath and warmth and quiet need. His body was solid against mine, warm, sure, and when he leaned over me, I didn't feel afraid. I felt wanted, not as a secret, not as a mistake, but as someone being seen. It wasn't wild. It wasn't messy. It was soft, slow. We explored one another with hands, with mouths, with silence. Every movement asked permission. Every response gave an answer. We took our time. And somewhere between the quiet gasps and the gentle press of skin, I realized I didn't want it to end. We did it. The only sound left in the room was our breath. Afterward, we lay there quietly, sweat drying on our skin, the music still humming in the background. The room felt suspended in time, like even the air knew something unspoken had shifted. Mark sat up slowly, reaching for a throw blanket and pulling it over us. The room felt suspended in time, like even the air knew something unspoken had shifted. Mark sat up slowly, reaching for a throw blanket and pulling it over us. He looked down at me, not smiling, not regretful, just still. "This can't be something casual," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not for me. If it's not real, I can't." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I looked up at him, my chest still rising and falling. And I nodded. "Okay." I whispered. We stayed like that for a while, saying nothing more. Eventually, I drifted off against his chest, lulled by the slow rise and fall of his breath, the steady thump of his heartbeat beneath my cheek. Sometime just after dawn, I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. Jason. Panic tore through me. I sat up, heart hammering. Mark was already awake. He reached for his clothes without a word, moving fast but calm, like he'd rehearsed this. I scrambled for my shirt, fingers fumbling, legs tangled in the blanket. Mark turned to me just before I slipped down the hall. He caught my wrist gently. "No one has to know," he said, eyes locked on mine. "But don't pretend it didn't mean something." I stared at him for a beat longer. Then I nodded once and disappeared down the hallway. The guest room door shut just before Jason's footsteps reached the porch. I sat on the edge of the bed, barely breathing. My skin still tingled. Everything inside me still burned. I didn't know what had changed between us, but I knew something had, and I didn't know what would happen next. The morning after should have felt normal. Jason clattered around the kitchen, pouring cereal with the kind of sleepy confidence only someone who slept uninterrupted could carry. The sun beamed through the windows like nothing had changed, like the air wasn't still thick with what had happened just hours before. But for me, everything had changed. I sat at the table, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending to care about the world outside the cabin, while every nerve in my body still hummed with the memory of Mark. The couch, his hands, the warmth of his breath against my skin. My lips still tingled, and my muscles still carried the echo of his touch, like fingerprints pressed into clay. Jason didn't notice how I couldn't look at his dad, didn't see how my spoon shook every time it scraped the inside of the bowl. If he noticed that Mark moved slower that morning, or how our eyes kept missing each other on purpose, he didn't say a word. And thank God for that, because if he'd looked even a little closer, he would have seen it, that I couldn't stop reliving it. Because we hadn't stopped. We hadn't stopped anything. That morning had only been the beginning. Every chance we got, every time Jason stepped out for a drink, every errand run, every late walk along the shoreline, Mark and I found each other again. Sometimes it was just a touch. Sometimes it was more. Always rushed. Always quiet. But never careless. Behind the laundry room door, while Jason grilled outside. In the guest room, while he showered, the water masking every muffled sound. On the back deck after midnight, our voices barely audible over the hush of the wind. Mark had a way of finding me, of making time feel like it bent around us, like the rules only mattered when other people were watching. And somehow we never got caught. But it was killing me, because with every secret kiss, I felt myself slipping deeper into something I didn't understand. I knew it couldn't last. Not like this, but the thought of it ending, it made my chest ache in ways I wasn't ready to face. By the last morning of our stay, something had shifted again. Not between us, between him. Mark had grown distant. He still looked at me, yes, but it was different. Longer, but heavier, like there was something he wanted to say but didn't know how. Jason made coffee and talked about the bonfire happening down the beach that night. "We should swing by," he said casually, already texting Mia. "Some of the guys from school are going to be there." I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "Sounds fun." Mark stood by the sink, scrubbing a dish that didn't need scrubbing, his knuckles white against the sponge. He hadn't said more than 5 words to me all morning. Later that afternoon, Jason went into town again, to grab firewood and more supplies for the night. He offered to bring me along, but I told him I wanted to nap. Truth was, I just needed a break from pretending. Mark was out on the back deck again, shirtless, hammer in hand, tinkering with the loose railing. I watched him from inside, pacing like a trapped animal. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say, only that I needed to say something. So I stepped outside. The screen door clicked softly shut behind me. He didn't turn. "Hey," I said quietly. He looked up. The sun caught the edge of his face, highlighting the lines around his eyes. "Hey." Silence. I sat on the bench near the railing, the wood warm beneath my legs. "You've been quiet," I said, my voice low. "So have you." He set the hammer down, wiped his hands on a rag, and leaned back against the post. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk." "I don't know what I want," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "I figured." A few more seconds passed. The waves broke gently along the shore. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called out, a quiet reminder that time was still moving forward. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes locked on mine, like he was searching for something buried deeper. "No," he said. "Not even for a second." My throat tightened. "But I respect you," he continued. "And I know you're young. You've got a whole life ahead of you. I don't want this to be some secret you carry like a weight." I didn't know how to respond, because the truth was, I didn't know how I felt. Was I confused? Yes. Scared? Absolutely. But did I want it to stop? Not even a little. I don't know what this is," I said. "It's whatever you want it to be," he replied, stepping forward. "But it doesn't have to end here. Not unless you want it to." The way he said it, soft, without pressure, like an open door instead of a trap, made something inside me crumble. I nodded, blinking hard. He gave me a small smile, then gently squeezed my shoulder before walking past me into the house. That night, we all sat by the bonfire, the flames painting everyone in shades of orange and gold. Mia curled up next to Jason, laughing at some story he was telling. I sat across from them, alone in my beach chair, arms folded against the breeze. Mark stood a little ways off, nursing a beer, chatting with a couple closer to his age. But he kept glancing over, and every time our eyes met, the air between us thinned. Later, after the fire died down and the beach emptied out, we walked back to the cabin. Jason and Mia went straight to his room, whispers and laughter fading behind the closed door. I wandered into the kitchen, barefoot and chilled from the night air. Mark was already there, leaning against the counter in the dark, the light from the open fridge casting a pale glow across his face. Neither of us spoke. I stepped closer. He didn't move. Instead, he reached out slowly and brushed the back of his fingers against mine. The touch was so small, so brief, but it said everything. "This doesn't have to be over," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Unless you want it to be." I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at our hands. His pinky brushed mine like a promise, wrapped in silence. That night, when I lay in bed alone, this time, the door locked and the covers pulled tight around me. Couldn't sleep. I kept seeing him, hearing him, feeling him. Was this just a summer thing? A mistake? Or the start of something more? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew I wanted to find out. So let me ask you this. If you were in my place, would you walk away? Or would you risk everything for someone who made you feel alive?